Ronnie and Reggie grew up in the post-war East End with its tradition of street violence and strong sense of community. The twins used both to increase their power. They bought their mum a local pub. The Krays worked hard to appear as local boys made good, but they were murderers and extortionists. They made sure cameras were on hand to help them gloss over the dark side of their activities. The twins killed people in cold blood, but the images that remain in the public's mind are of Ronnie and Reggie giving money to charity, of Reggie posing with the stars, of Ronnie hobnobbing with politicians like Lord Boothby, and the twins immortalised by the fashionable photographer David Bailey. But in the underworld, the twins were known for what they were, and as in their early boxing days, their reputation preceded them. Albert Donahue became a soldier at Fort Valence, the nickname for the Krays family home at number 178. Like much of the East End, it's now been demolished, but even in its notorious heyday, it hardly resembled the fortress of Ronnie's fantasies. Here, he and his brother held court and presided over the firm's board meetings. From the front room of the two up, two down, they ran a criminal empire. The first time he set eyes on Ronnie, it was obvious to the policeman who was eventually to jail the twins that he was playing the part of an American gangster.
It was a summer's evening, and I realised that a car had drawn up immediately outside the door and looked outside. It's a big American type car, and a guy stepped out of the car, put with his hand in his pocket as though he had a gun in his pocket, and he sort of swept the street, looking up and down and making sure that there was no one inside, and then gave a signal, and the back door opened, and out stepped Ronnie Kray. And I was amazed because he was dressed for all the world like a 1930s Chicago gangster. He had a long, long cashmere coat that reached to his ankles, tied in a loose belt at the waist. His hair was greased and parted, and he wore his glasses. And then he swept across the pavement and into the pub, and he looked to me like Al Capone without his fedora.
Well, I was known as Reggie's man. I mean, he didn't use words like minder, bodyguard, that sort of thing. Just, I was Reggie's man.
And did you have lots of money in your pocket?
Well, apart from the twins' pension, if you did any business with them, if you actually went on a bit of business and there was money involved, you got a slice of that. Plus I could eat and drink for nothing, and I could get my clothes made to measure next to nothing. If you needed a car, you just went to a car site and frightened the governor and pulled one off the front for a couple of weeks and run it into the ground. Hardly any expenses.
Protection was one of the firm's main sources of income. People paid up because they were afraid. The twins couldn't afford to let their reputation for violence slip. That reputation usually ensured that their victims didn't complain to the law. Detective Inspector Nipper Reed had to sit back and wait for witnesses who would dare to speak out against the gangsters. In 1965, some 3 years before he finally arrested them, he thought he had a breakthrough. London club owner Hugh McCowan complained to the police about the protection racket. The twins were charged with demanding money with menaces. They wanted 50% of the profits from his club, the Hideaway. The people who knew the twins and their methods were not surprised when they were acquitted, after witnesses retracted their evidence.
There's no question about what prevented witnesses giving evidence to suggest that the Krays are involved, and that was terror. Just absolute fear and terror, because the Krays generated that by their threats, by intimidation, and by their violence. People were openly saying They won't be in long. They'll get away with it. They'll get out. And so it happened. This gave them even more confidence, even more arrogance, even more certainty that they were the kings of the underworld in the East End and that nothing could change that.
The underworld was bracing itself for all-out war between London's two major firms, the Krays and the Richardsons. This never happened because in March 1966, the Richardsons got involved with a local gang in a gunfight at the Mr. Smith's Club in Catford. One man was shot dead. As a result, most of the Richardsons were either under sedation or under arrest.
The Richardsons were now broke up. Some were in hospital, some were in Nick. Cornell was a loner, and he's come over to our territory. It was an insult. Ronnie took it as an insult. To us, Cornell was a finished man. He was beat. He had no backup, you know. Any one of us would have faced him in a pub, but he wouldn't have come to killing the man. There was no reason to kill him.
George Cornell was the only key member of the Richardsons' firm still on the loose. He was a violent man who'd taken part in their torture sessions. He crossed the river into Kray territory to drink at the Blind Beggar pub. Legend has it that he'd called Ronnie Kray a fat puff. What's certainly true is that Cornell was afraid of no one. The pub was less than a mile from Fort Valence. Cornell was with his friend Albie Woods, who now talks publicly about that night for the first time.
The pub was completely empty. There wasn't a soul in there. So we walked right the way along the long bar, and as it bends round at the end, there's a partition there, and there's curtains by the partition which led into the public bar. Jules sat in the corner, we were back towards the partition. I sat on the corner, facing him.
The underworld grapevine was quick to inform Ronnie Kray of an enemy presence on his manor. He set off with his driver in a 9mm Maus automatic.
5 minutes went by, or maybe 10 minutes. All of a sudden, George said, look who's here. Then I realised that someone had stopped behind me. George was sneering at him. And at that instant, it was bang, the shot was fired. All I could see was one massive, big, flame of smoke sort of thing, like, blue. Couldn't see Jules then, Then I slid off my stool to duck behind the bar, and then down he came. He wasn't unconscious, he was still conscious, he was sort of moaning. I was just saying to him, all right, Jules, I'm with you, And I put a cushion underneath his head, made it try to make him comfortable. He had a hole in the face, and it was pumping out onto me, just pumping all the time. And I didn't see any other, wounds or anything, I was wearing a blue mohair suit with a collar and tie. And when I looked at myself, I was absolutely saturated in blood. And I just took the coat off, put it on the seat, and jumped in my car and drove to the first telephone box that I came to phone his wife, Olive.
All the police were able to get on the night was some scene of the crime photographs. Albie Woods maintained he didn't see the killer, and the other witnesses went to ground. Cornell was still alive when he arrived at the London hospital. The firm left the manor for a pub in Walthamstow. In Ronnie's mind, they were his troops, and he was their colonel.
Getting bulletins from a nurse in London hospital, and she said, this guy's not dead. He's been shot in the head with a 9mm bullet. He's still alive. It was early hours of the morning anyway when we came on the news that he is dead. And a cheer went up in the pub. Imagine that. The colonel cheered first, and then every the others join in. Look, I'm with you, sir. Cheer because a man's dead, and dead. That's it. That's the sort of life it was.
Back in the 60s, once the twins' violence had escalated to murder, hardened members of the firm realised they were completely out of control. They might even turn against their own.
The twins wouldn't send a stranger to get you, because they know you'd either do the stranger or you wouldn't show. So the person who's going to come for you is your partner. So we had a little arrangement that if he used my first name, Albert, that's a warning, and vice versa, you know. Which, like, to anyone accompanying them, if he knocked at my door and said, "It's only me, Albert," no problem. Don't sound like a signal, but it is. You know. In that way, I'd come flying out the window with a shooter in my hand or something, you know.
As the instinct for self-preservation took over, the firm's main men considered murdering the twins.
When something would happen, it would be, we could have done that fat bastard last night, you know. We used to call them Gert and Daisy, the two, Reggie and Ronnie. You know. But Ronnie was vulnerable because when we're going somewhere in the car, he had to sit in the passenger seat. The people with Ronnie, just sitting behind him. Just take him through the tunnel and bow, he's gone. You know. Chuck him out the other side or take him somewhere and bury him, burn him. The problem, as we saw it, was not the twins, it was after that. If we want to carry on, we've got to build up a new fear. Plus we've got to handle a very likely arrest for the actual murder of the twins. But they were definitely as much on the list as we were.
This tremendous power to terrify was the Kray twins' greatest weapon.
Ronnie just had to glare at some people when they shit themselves. That was one of his favourite tricks. He would sit in a pub or a club where we were, and people would be brought in for various reasons, and he could just sit there and stare at this person for half an hour, and that person he hasn't said a word to him, but that person's gone away and thoroughly cowed, you know. He'd been told off without a word. That was how much fear they generated.
In the warped world of the twins, their next victim, Jack the Hat McVitie, caused his own death.
And when people go into the McVitie murder, if ever a man brought about his own death, if you want to put it that way, or if ever a man was the cause of his own murder, is a case that stands on his shoulders above everyone else. And I'll explain why. He had outrageously challenged them time and time again. He had picked up phones throughout the East End pubs and that, pretend to phone them up and mug them off. He was warm, knock it on the head. He had turned up at the Regency Club with a shotgun, drunk and peeled out of his head, knowing one of them was in there and threatened to shoot him. They got to hear about these things. Now you must remember, in their position, how far could they let him go?
The twins never provoked a row in their life. They was provoked. They either got killed or they retaliated. I mean, they didn't want violence. It was put to them all the time. It's hard to understand until you've been there and seen it.
Jack McVitie, a small-time villain often out of his head on pills, was invited to a flat in Evelyn Road in Hackney on the 28th of October 1967. The twins had commandeered the place for the night, ordering the girls who lived there to leave. Jack the Hat thought Tony Lumbriano was taking him to a party.
There's four of us in a car. In this car, there's a Zodiac, two-tone, Mark II. There's me, there's Jack the Hat driving. We arrive at Everett Road, we park down the side, we get out and we walk into the door. There's a long passage and down a flight of steps. As we walk in, I was the first one in. Now I was very, very surprised to see Ronnie Kray there, number one. Reggie pulled in from behind and tried to shoot him in the head, but the gun failed to go off. And he clipped it a few times, and then he sat down and there was a bit of talk. What have I done? And then Reggie took him, you know what you've done, Jack. Now it comes to an end. He stood up and walked over the window and he punched the pane out the window. That was when it was said he tried to die for it. He never dived or attempted to dive through that window. He punched it in sheer frustration that he had been set up. Now, the next thing that happened, I turned around and there's a carving knife, a normal carving bread knife in his hands, that obviously someone had picked up from the kitchen. And the next thing, it was over. I saw it, I think he stabbed him twice, 3 times away. I didn't actually see it because I turned away. And the next thing, he's lying on the floor. Now, it was said that Reggie pinned him to the floor with a knife. That, through the throat. Total, never happened. Could you imagine that happening? I mean, the fact that he'd been stabbed 3 times, personally, I think the first one killed him. That's what I think happened there. I mean, it was over, it was done. Now, no one knows what to do. It's happened. We've got an event on our hands. What amazed me, the twins said, get rid of them, Jamie. Just like that. And they went.
Jack McVitie's body has never been found.
Obviously, I regret a life being lost. I mean, you must do that, whatever way you look at it. Like, there's a point there that he won a grass or anything like that. It's just his way of life clashed with ours.
Men who could casually dismiss murder were recruited by the twins and moulded into a firm that could swing into action and cover up the evidence of their crimes.
My job is to decorate, and these girls have been left to clear up the pools of blood, not just spatters, puddles, and they have to mop it up and keep emptying their base and start again. And then I had to paint, dig out some bits of plaster, fill, tar paper, then wallpaper, the whole place inside out.
The police didn't even know there'd been a murder until 6 months later, where an informant told them. Around the hastily repaired window and beneath the layers of wallpaper, they found traces of blood. Those close to Reggie knew his twin had been pressurising him to commit murder.
Christ, I couldn't understand it. The guy had never done him any harm, you know what I mean? He was just a pill popper, ladies' man, life and soul to party. I know it was just Reggie's answer to Ronnie's Cornell. When Ronnie got drunk and he was heavy on his pills, he would be screaming at him, "You cowardly bastard, I've done mine, now it's time you skinny slag, it's about time you done yours." You know. Simple as that. There's no secret about that at all. You ain't got the guts. You know.
Exactly 1 year after the murder of Jack the Hat, the Kray twins were arrested after a night out at the Astor Club. Armed police broke down the door of the council flat where they still lived with their mum. A total of 26 people were arrested as the police rounded up the firm. They had believed they were untouchable, but their power depended on fear, and now there was no one left to enforce it. One by one, witnesses came forward to testify against the Krays. Ronnie boasted that if he hadn't been in court, he'd probably have been with Judy Garland. But his days of mingling with celebrities were over. For murdering Cornell and McVitie, the twins got life with a 30-year recommendation.
It was a reflection of what the judge felt was the right penalty for the crimes that they committed. I think he saw them for what they were, as arrogant, dictatorial leaders of a gang that had warped the society of the East End, committed brazen and quite gratuitous murders without regard to the lives and the considerations of other people, and they terrorised the whole of an area of London.
The sentences for the 10 members of the firm totalled 159 years. This is what Ronnie and Reggie saw as an armed convoy drove them to Durham jail after the trial.
Their arrogance is still apparent. They've both written 2 books. There is not one sign of repentance or remorse. In fact, they both savour the fact. Ronnie Kray talks about the delight that he still enjoys at remembering how he shot Cornell. Reggie Kray says he's no regrets about having stabbed to death poor Jack McVitie. So there was no question of any remorse. There was no feeling that, yes, we were wrong, we were bad, we were evil. They've never said that.
If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly, moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.